All right. Today is Monday, June 30, 2025. And welcome to a new macro discussion where we're going to talk about the status of the consumer. You might have read the title of the video and thought to yourself, oh Mav, we've been hearing these kind of headlines about the consumer getting weaker for about a couple of years now. And we hear that the consumer is having a negative sentiment about this, and they're getting delinquencies in that, and nothing happens. They keep spending, and the market holds, and the economy never dips into a recession. So what's new here? Why should I listen to this crap? I say maybe because by the end of this video, you're gonna crap your own pants, because we're seeing things that we haven't seen before. We're seeing things right now, this moment, that are happening for the first time for the consumer. And again, by the end of the video, you're probably going to be crapping your pants instead of being dismissive. So grab a new fresh pair of underwear, or perhaps some diapers, and keep them handy. Without further ado, let's dive right into it here, folks. In Focus tonight. Broke. We got no money anymore. And the younger you are, the broker you are. And if you think you're just going to get a new sugar daddy and that's going to solve your problems, you know what? Maybe your sugar daddy soon enough is going to need a sugar daddy. So stay tuned here and pay attention because this is really important. We're going to begin the conversation from the latest PCE report that we got Friday. Here's the headline for you. PCE report today shows U.S. inflation, listen to this, ticked higher in May as consumers pared spending. What do we conclude from the headline like this? It is an evidence of stagflation in the economy. You have sticky inflation that refuses to go down to the Fed's target. And at the same time, you have weakness in the consumer. Let's add more details to what we're talking about. We'll look at the annual change in the U.S. PCE price index, which is the Fed's favorite. This is what they use to determine the policy of interest rates in the economy. And what you're seeing right now is all items up about 2.3% year on year, excluding food and energy, what we call core PCE, up 2.7% year on year, beating expectations. Now you might say, but Mav, look, this is not bad. This is 2.3, all items 2.7, excluding food and energy. Yeah, but it's still way above the Fed's target. And who's to say that this rate is going to go down from this point on? We have tariffs coming in the pipeline. At the same time, we look at consumer spending. Here's Peter Brezen. He says that consumer spending is surging if you stand on your head. And we haven't seen a collapse in consumer spending like this, except in periods prior to a recession. So this is a huge warning sign, but I will give you more details. Something new that we haven't seen before. For all of you who say, oh, we've been talking about consumer weakness for a while now. Nothing happened, Mav. This economy is pretty much driven by services. Services spending is declining sharply for the first time. It's always been above 2% in a 6-month annualized change rate. Now we're seeing it dipping down. We haven't seen this in 24, 23, or even 22. I see this as different because in the past we've seen weakness in the consumer based on sentiment, based on feelings, based on finances, based on the stock market. But now we're seeing tangible weakness by the consumer translating in weakness in spending. But speaking of consumer confidence, you look at the board in the June survey, overall index is heading down. If you look at views of the current economy, they're heading down. Most importantly, expectations for the futures are diving down big. And these kind of declines look eerily similar to the look that we've seen prior to the financial crisis back in 2008, 2009. This data by the PCE report aligns with the data we're seeing from private banks. The latest, of course, coming from Bank of America. And the bank says that consumer spending contracted for the first time in over a year. What are they talking about? Here's what they're talking about. They're talking about consumer spending now dipping negative. And we're talking about in the month of May. We're not talking about as we've seen back in Jan 24. We've seen negative spending, but usually that happens in the aftermath of the Christmas season, the holiday season. We see a surge in spending and then spending retreats in the month of January and February. Not the case this time around. The case here is we have weakness in the consumer prior to the summer, which is supposed to be a hot consumer season. Gee, what's contributing to the declines in consumer spending? Look at this. Electronics dropping down like a rock. Bad implications for any consumer electronics business in America, as you see this massive flush in consumer spending. Now I see a surge prior to that. What is that saying? This is saying that the consumer have been front-loading buying electronics before the tariffs, and they've already stocked up. So anybody who says, oh, but you're going to see laptop sales going higher or iPhone sales going higher, the consumer already spent. They're not going to spend from this point on. They already bought. And we expect to see more and more weakness in consumer spending in electronics, specifically once we see the tariffs kicking in a tangible way. You also see it in airlines, huge decline. But this has been happening since the beginning of the year. I attribute this to what we've been talking about since the beginning of the year, which is foreign tourists. They don't want to come to the U.S. anymore. There are a lot of reasons behind that. There's, of course, the tariff war. There's the comment about annexing Canada, and the Canadian consumer is just boycotting America right now. On top of that, we have all of the immigration stuff where you get harassed at the airport, where people are getting deported. Norwegian guy had a meme of J.D. Vance, and he gets deported because of that, denied entry. And who knows if they're going to deport you even to the right country. They're going to deport you to El Salvador. So a lot of folks are not coming here. They don't want to come here. And that's impacting spending on airliners. Because believe it or not, before the summer, a lot of folks are booking trips, airline tickets in preparation of the summer season when they visit the United States. And that leads me to lodging, which you see in the line in green. I expect to see airline spending rebounding because you're going to begin to see the domestic consumer having to travel in the summer. But you will see lodging spending heading down. Why? Because international tourists, they book the airline tickets first, but they're not going to spend on lodging until they come here or they get really close to their travel dates. So I expect to see more weakness in lodging, but the only thing that is holding right now is restaurants. And not just any kind of restaurants. We'll talk about that in a minute. More insights on consumer spending. We see that higher and middle income households, the wage growth for these two categories is now outpacing the wage growth of the lower income consumer. Why is that important? Believe it or not, the lower income consumer, they spend the majority, if not all, of their wages. So consumption really relies on the lower end of the consumer, not so much on the higher end of the consumer. Go back as far as this chart goes, Jan 23. You've seen that wage growth in the lower end consumer been outpacing the wage growth in the middle and higher income consumer level. That keeps consumer spending alive. So you could see consumer sentiment weak. You could see bad data from time to time, retail sales going down, delinquencies going higher. But so long as we have wage growth among lower income consumers, the economy stays afloat. Now we see lower income consumers falling behind. And that's a huge warning sign for the economy. And it's something we haven't seen, not even in 24. We're seeing it for the first time this year. Keep that in mind. When you ask about what's new, here's what's new. Furthermore, if you look at the firmer spending, it's happening via the boomers, not happening so much by Gen X or Gen Z or millennials. The younger consumer is getting screwed in this economy. The wealthier and older consumer is doing okay, at least for now. You can see that reflection, of course, in cruises, for example, cruise line stocks, all-time highs. And that is a reflection of the baby boomer spending. But then you see retail stores that cater to the Gen Zers or millennials or Gen Xers not doing so hot so. You can see it here, perhaps more illustration of the weakness that we see in the younger consumer, the buy now, pay later. You can see that the baby boomers in green, the traditionalists, they're not really using that much. Of course, the rate increased as they begin to hear about it, but it's minimal, really. What we see is an alarming trend among Gen Xers, where the rate of utilization of buy now, pay later is increasing. The Gen Xers are absolutely screwed right now. I'll tell you why in a minute. But more screwed than the Gen Xers are millennials and Gen Zers, where we see the rate. I mean, look at back to 22. Millennials were utilizing buy now, pay later 8%. Now we're talking about 10%. And Gen Zers are also accelerating that kind of rate of utilizing buy now, pay later. But we know from previous data that they're getting delinquent on their buy now, pay later loans. That's disastrous. I mean, if you're buying stuff you cannot afford because maybe you have to, you might look at this data and say, oh, why do they need to spend? Well, sometimes we've seen from the data before that they've been using buy now, pay later for groceries. That's how bad the economy is right now. And on top of that, they can't pay the loan that they took to buy groceries. This, of course, aligns with Gen Z spending. So if you look at 18 to 24-year-old Gen Zers, you can see that their spending rates year on year absolutely collapsed in many categories of spending. Video games, down over 20%, almost 25%. Accessories, small appliances, houseware, technology, furniture, apparel, even beauty. They're having to cut spending in a big way. That's another thing that is different than now and before. For those of you who ask, well, we've been talking about consumer weakness last year and the year before. We're seeing an entire generation right now falling apart from the consumption picture. The Gen Zers, and even to a certain extent the millennials, are facing the same problems. Now, if you look at overall spending by age group change year on year, you can see that the 25 to 35 holding pretty much to the flat line, 35 plus, still positive, but declining. But look at the collapse that we've been seeing among the Gen Zers, 18 and 24. They're getting absolutely broke here, absolutely annihilated out of the consumption picture. You think that's not going to show up in corporate earnings? You think that's not going to show up in tangible results in the economy? Think again, buddy. This is not looking good. And again, you can go back all the way 23, 24. All of these trends were upward. Now these trends are downward, and they're negative in the Gen Zers consumers. Unbelievable. Now, why do I say that Gen Xers are screwed? Because Gen Xers are more exposed to student loans, which is another bomb that's about to be detonated in the economy. Here's the headline for you. The summer is looking grim for millions of student loans borrowers behind on payments. What are they talking about? This is really, really important because you're about to see that impact in the economy really soon. A new analysis from TransUnion, a credit reporting firm, showed an uptick in borrowers at risk of facing those consequences this summer. It found that 31% of borrowers have a payment of more than 90 days past due as of April, up from 20.5% in February. So again, in just a couple of months, we went from 20.5% delinquent to 31%. And it estimates that of the 5.8 million newly delinquent borrowers, 1.8 million of them could default in July. What's different, Mav? We've been talking about this for a while. Here's what's different. The analysis said an additional 1 million borrowers could default in August, followed by another 2 million in September. We can, of course, talk about the negative impact on the borrowers the banks are going to lose as these student loans default. But what do you think the impact will be in the consumers exposed to these loans? Continuing. Negative credit reporting resumed in October 2024, and while the Department of Education said in early June it would be pausing Social Security garnishment, wage garnishment will resume later this summer. Unbelievable, isn't it? They garnish you Social Security to pay for student loans. It's a scam. The department did not respond to a request for comment from BI Business Insider on a specific date that wage garnishment will begin. So they're not going to garnish your Social Security, at least not right now, thank God. But they're going to garnish your wages. Again, what do you think that's going to do to the consumption power in the economy? We're talking about millions and millions of consumers here. Turnbull, this is the analyst in this article, said that the economic implications of delinquency and default, including hits to credit scores and losing part of a paycheck, could be severe. Those are things that I'm not only behind in paying on my student loan, but now my income stream is impacted as well. So it's kind of a compounding effect that consumers would see, and we're already seeing the impact. Look at the average FICO scores in the US. So long as they're going higher, we're doing okay, and folks are getting loans, auto loans, mortgage loans, and they're doing fine in the economy, credit cards. But now we're beginning to see negative trends in the average FICO score in the US. When was the last time we've seen this phenomenon? Yep, right before the financial crisis in 2008-2009. On top of that, the big ugly bill that they're passing right now, that's going to cut a lot of Medicaid payments. So even the seniors who are spending, a lot of other consumers who are spending, now they got to be really careful because their medical benefits will be cut, number one. Number two, there are a lot of legislations in this bill that would impact consumer spending negatively. Take, for example, the EV credit that Elon Musk is pissed off about. If you buy an EV right now, you get no credit. That's going to impact your consumption and spending power in the economy. A lot of incentives are being now eliminated. And that is leading us to see a really, really important phenomenon. Something, again, we haven't seen in the last couple of years, which is the consumer in all income levels are downgrading where they spend. And this is really important for you to pay attention to because we've been talking about it for a while, and it opens a lot of investment opportunities. I'll give you an example here. You guys remember, of course, Walmart when they said the affluent consumer is now downgrading and they're shopping at Walmart instead because they cannot afford the fancy stores they used to shop at. So now they have to go to Walmart. Walmart was a benefactor of that. But the existing consumer of Walmart is also broke and they have to downgrade to another store. And this is why we've seen the dollar stores. The headline here, for example, mentions Dollar General sees sales jump as wealthier shoppers tighten their belts. Yep, the wealthies now shopping at Dollar General. And this is why we invested in Dollar Tree, at least in this channel. You look at the chart of DG, Dollar General in yellow, and then you see Walmart in blue. You see the performance here today. Dollar General is absolutely surging, like an AI company, up over 50% year to date. Walmart, up about a little over 6.5%. Not bad, but it's about to get worse for them because whatever sales volume they gain from an affluent consumer downgrading to Walmart, they're also losing a lot of their existing customers to Dollar General, dollar stores like Dollar Tree and others. And all in all, it's going to be negative for Walmart. We're not seeing this phenomenon just in grocery stores. We're seeing it in apparel too. For example, you have Macy's in the bar chart, and then you see in red TJ Maxx. Macy's, a little bit more expensive than TJ Maxx, to say the least, right? Look at the divergence that we see between these two charts. Macy's heading down, losing over 42% of its value since the beginning of 2024. Meanwhile, TJ Maxx gained about 33%. Why? Because a lot of folks who used to shop at Macy's can no longer afford to do that. So they have to downgrade and shop at TJ Maxx instead. If you look at TJ Maxx now in red, then you have Ross stores in blue. This is really, really interesting because Ross was tracking TJ Maxx, was also a benefactor of the consumer downgrading. But there's an important caveat. Ross is in a gray zone. Why? Because if you have somebody who used to spend and consume at Nordstrom or Macy's, they're now downgrading to TJ Maxx. And for them right now, TJ Maxx is okay. Ross consumers, on the other hand, as they get hurt economically, they're downgrading to Goodwill. I told you the story that a few weeks ago when I was donating something at the Goodwill store here in Las Vegas, and it was packed. And I had to go in and ask. And a lot of the consumers, they have fancy cars parked in the parking lot. I had to ask. A lot of them are saying we cannot afford the regular store. We have to come here now. So that leaves Ross in a gray zone because their consumers going to Goodwill now, and the consumers who are downgrading from Macy's, Nordstrom are being held by TJ Maxx. So Ross is not really benefiting from this downgrading phenomenon that we see in the economy. But here's another thing you got to keep in mind. Let's plug Ralph Lauren. In purple, you see it right here in this chart. Ralph Lauren is absolutely crushing everybody else, including TJ Maxx. Ralph is up about 88% since 2024. That is a reflection that the wealthier consumer is doing a lot better than the middle and lower income consumers. But at the same time, let's now do Burberry, for example, high-end luxury store in orange, and then you got Ralph Lauren again in purple. You can see the Burberry been collapsing, down about 11% since 24. Well, you see Ralph Lauren stock surging higher. Why? Because a lot of consumers who used to shop at Burberry, wealthier consumers, they now have to downgrade and shop at Ralph Lauren instead. So even within the micro segments of the consumer, among the wealthy, they're downgrading within the stores that they have accessibility to. Among the lower end consumer, you're seeing that downgrade from Ross to Goodwill. Among the middle income consumer, from Macy's to TJ Maxx. Another example for you among the wealthier consumer, which you're looking at right now, is TPR Tapestry in green, and then you have LVMH, Louis Vuitton in white. You see the drastic contrast of performance here. Louis Vuitton is down over 35% since 24. Tapestry is up over 135%. We talked about this in the coverage. We talked about the affluent consumer. A lot of them are saying, okay, I cannot afford the Louis Vuitton right now. It's too much. I'm going to buy a Coach bag instead. And that's a positive for Tapestry because we have consumers who used to shop at other stores, higher end stores, now downgrading and buying from Tapestry instead. Another one for you, Lululemon in red. Look at this, since 24, it collapsed, pretty much lost over half of its value. In white, on the other hand, you have Urban Outfitters. Consumers broke. They can't really shop at Lululemon anymore, so they're buying yoga pants from the online retailers that you see in TikTok and Instagram. This is why you see a retail store that used to cater to higher-end consumers like Lulu getting hit, and then a retail store that caters to the lower-income, middle-income consumer, Urban Outfitters, doing pretty good, up about 100% in the same time frame. We see the same phenomenon in restaurants. So if you look at Chili's, for example, that's Brinker's, the ticker EAT, or the Cheesecake Factory, the ticker CAKE. They've been outperforming in a big way. Why? Because folks who used to dine at fancy restaurants, they're having to downgrade and now settle down to dining at Chili's or a Cheesecake Factory. You see it in the performance of pizza stores, be it Casey, be it Papa John's, be it Domino's, moving higher. Why? Because a lot of consumers who used to dine out at restaurants are saying, you know what, I'm just going to settle down to delivery pizza. So you're seeing that downgrading theme being exacerbated in this economy. And your question is, with all of this bad data, Mav, what is the nail in the coffin that opens the floodgates, economically speaking? We begin to see bad things and we head closer to a recession. All of the data that we talked about, consumers being overburdened by debt and getting delinquent, not to mention, of course, a lot of home values, by the way, bought in 21, 22, 23, are now underwater. The missing ingredient from blowing up the economy is unemployment. If we begin to see unemployment moving higher, all of this is going to begin to blow up at the same time. And it's going to happen so fast, you're not going to be able to wrap your head around it. Guess what we're seeing right now? Continued unemployment claims have recently surged significantly higher. We haven't seen that in 22, we haven't seen that in 23, not even 24. We're seeing it right now for the first time. The message of the day is tick-tock. We're running out of time here. And with what's coming in the pipeline from student loan defaults and wage garnishment and the tariffs and cutting Medicare benefits, what do you think will happen to this economy? Right now, it's being floated based on B2B spending among the big cap technology companies, where NVIDIA buys shit from another company, Microsoft buys shit from NVIDIA, and they keep the stock market higher, and retirees feel okay, and employers feel okay, and everything holds. But sooner than later, this negative feedback you're seeing in the consumer will begin to reach even these giant B2B businesses. And they're going to begin to cut spending, reduce hiring plans. This is going to bring the end of this cycle in a really violent way. But until then, folks, I hope you found this discussion informative. If you did, once again, hit the subscribe button, give us a like, participate in the comments section with your opinion. Better yet, join us as a Maverick member if you haven't already. Links in the description, either here on Patreon or YouTube. You'll find all of the links in the description. But for now, this is all I got for you, folks. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I appreciate and love all of you. I'll be talking to you again tomorrow. Good night.
Just standing up for my rights as a consumer. I'm rolling back prices to 1965. What do you think of that? Donuts. Package of 6, how much? $1.12. Oh! Too much.